In my last video, I dove deep into Fallout's most polarizing expansion, Dead Money. I walked the haunted streets of the Sierra Madre's villa, combed its ruins to uncover the truth of its story, world, and horror. I came out the other end with the conclusion that the gameplay was frustrating and tedious, but few other pieces of Fallout content have better inspired that level of wonder and consideration of man's dark disease of corruption and the many ways it can express itself than Dead Money did. Today, the agenda calls us to explore Honest Hearts, Fallout New Vegas' second DLC outing. When I first played it 13 years ago, I remember being underwhelmed by the environment and the story, neither of which brought the bold, evocative style of Dead Money. But is there more to consider with Honest Hearts that a 14-year-old version of me in 2011 couldn't appreciate? Have I gotten any more worthy of analyzing content since then? Will I get to wear a park ranger hat? All these questions and more will be answered as I head into Zion and discover all it offers. If you haven't already, consider subscribing and leaving a like. It does immeasurable good for validating my continued existence on YouTube, which scientists the world over have agreed is a necessary evil for life on Earth. See, if you don't, I will be forced to make sure you forget your phone every time you use the restroom. Have fun reading the back of a shampoo bottle for entertainment. Anyways, let's get started with Honest Hearts. Jumping into the game, I entered the travels of Karl Marx Sniper Assassin, who was coming fresh off his time with Dead Money. I will take no follow-up questions about the name. He's putting the means of destruction in the hands of the ones doing the work. Him. He sucks with money, but he's spreading the wealth of long-range lead between the eyes of anyone who crosses him. After enduring the horrors of the Sierra Madre and its corrupting force on the hearts and minds of all who gaze into its abyss, we now walk the waste as a haunted fellow. The Mojave knows nary a soul more disillusioned nor parched for faith in humanity than us. Like any self-disrespecting person on the verge of total collapse, we found ourselves in Freeside, rubbing elbows with rock bottom. We need a break from the action, from everything. Fortunately, a small caravan outfit is calling on all well-traveled roughnecks to saddle up and join their expedition to Zion National Park. With a name like Happy Trails, it's hard to imagine a better respite from the evils of man. It's just what we need, some honest work and a fresh of breath air. We bid farewell to the stinking streets of Freeside and its people. See you later, heavily armed Securitrons. Adios, giant rat and the children hunting you for your meats. Sayonara, the kings and your legally distinct Elvis impersonations. We have a happy trails adventure. As the strip fades into the distance, we make our way to the Northern Passage, where Jed Masterson waits for one last member to ready up and join their journey to Zion. There's a weight limit that prevents us from bringing too much junk into Honest Hearts. We are allowed to stow 75 pounds worth of shit on our person, lest the treacherous road ahead tears apart. Some tough decisions must be made. But against all odds, we managed to shove a bunch of precious and powerful items into a nondescript wooden crate. We'll have to take Jed's word that it'll still be there when we return. I chatted with some of the other caravan members. There's Stella, a no-nonsense former sheriff who kept the peace in a town that couldn't stay out of trouble. There's Ricky, a man whose unwavering delusion has gotten him further in life than anyone could have expected. He's also a red-hot psycho addict.
Hey, f you! I didn't say nothing about using psycho!
Everything he says is a complete and utter lie designed to convince you he isn't a total wiener boy.
Why, once I got jumped by 3 death jaws. Except, actually, it was 4 of them. Imagine that!
He brags about his fancy Vault 22 jumpsuit and Pit-Boy, whose extraordinary qualities are so far beyond my ability to comprehend that even my horned metal helmet couldn't possibly keep my head from exploding. When I revealed it's actually called a Pip-Boy, and that I have one too, suddenly, it's not so special. Ricky feels like a spiritual sibling to Fantastic from Helios 1. He is a man who has comically grifted and fumbled into situations where he's way over his head. The Happy Trails expedition is in desperate need of someone with a working Pip-Boy, so they can use its topographical maps to traverse the tricky geography of Utah. Ricky's Pip-Boy, however, is not functional, and it would be a real shame if a certain courier went and blabbed about that, getting him kicked off the caravan.
But fine, I'll tell Jed I'm carrying less so you can carry more. What an asshole.
It's nice to have friends. A couple of generic caravan guards are joining us on our adventure. Jed yucks it up with a game of caravan, something that no mere mortal has ever understood in any meaningful way. Seriously, every time I play this, I feel like the rules change. Enough jabbering, it's time to head to Zion. Jed Masterson introduces us to Honest Hearts with a slick slideshow about the converging forces and histories that led to Zion becoming what it is. I appreciate that the New Vegas DLCs featured these opening movies to fill me in. When I was going through the Fallout 3 expansions, they would often dive straight into the experience without much fanfare or elegance. A slideshow with narration isn't exactly peak storytelling, but it's something. Fallout 3 would rely on the player exhausting countless dialogue trees with the people surrounding an add-on to dispense vital info about the world or narrative we were exploring, when there was one, at least. New Vegas, in contrast, gives you a perfect primer before casting you into the wilderness, and I am here for it. Jed spins a tale about a community up north in Utah called New Canaan, known for their religious fervor and honest, hearty ways. Cut to the Legion as they first raged along their warpath. They were led by the Malpay legate, Joshua Graham, a New Canaanite and the meanest, nastiest, most ruthless son of a bitch in the wasteland. Upon hearing of his contributions to the Legion atrocities, New Canaan was ashamed that Joshua Graham was once one of them. When the NCR took a break from being a corruption-infested ball of incompetence and got their shit together, they kicked the Legion's ass at the first battle of the Hoover Dam. Caesar couldn't let failure go unpunished. Despite being their most gifted warrior and revered leader, Joshua Graham became an example that Caesar would never tolerate defeat, and no one was safe from his wrath. He had Graham covered in pitch, lit on fire, and thrown into the Grand Canyon. Legends claim he climbed out of that hole and now walks the scorched earth as the burned man. That begs the question, are the legends true? Don't worry, our motivational quote daddy Joshua Graham will not disappoint. Jed's stories did wonders for passing the time on the long road to Zion. But now we've made it, and Honest Hearts is underway. I feel a kinship with Zion and its rocky paradise. Just as my soul has been eroded from the harsh realities of post-Armageddon, the valleys, ravines, and gorges of Zion have been carved by millennia of rushing water eating away at it. That may not be such a bad thing. Zion is much better for letting the world have its way with it. Perhaps I too can be. Nature may work in good faith, but when what haunts me is man's hardwired predisposition for obsession and the horrors committed on its behalf, the scars end up a bit uglier than Zion's. Our crew has emerged from the southern passage into Zion. We took a short pause to catch our breath and gather our bearings. Stella and Jed skirmish back and forth about how to proceed, as they are the only remotely competent human beings here. Stella warns that the way we came has collapsed behind us and can no longer be passed. This foreshadowed how we would be stuck in Zion until our business was concluded. I stood by, waiting for them to tell me where and when to go. But before anything else, we were ambushed by the local pale-painted force known as the White Legs. In an instant, my motley crew of misfits and Ricky were dispatched by a storm of lead raining down from the ridges above. When the dust settled and I was the only surviving member of the once proud Happy Trails expedition, I honored the fallen with a proper burial, gently tossing my comrades off a nearby cliff so they could caravan into the afterlife and be peacefully laid to rest. Of course, the cliff led to another cliff, so I was forced to huck them for a second time into the river below. Their journey is now complete, but mine has just begun. A rickety bridge gave way to the larger valley of Zion. One last White Leg fighter threatened me from afar, but a well-placed round had disburdened them from living. Another man approached over the hill ahead and was the first friendly face to greet me. Follows Chalk as a loyal folk of the Dead Horses tribe, native to Zion. He encourages me to follow him to their camp to be introduced to their leader, Joshua. With my caravan torn asunder, I had no choice but to be swayed by the winds of Zion in whatever direction it took me. For now, it was to the Dead Horses camp. A Yaoguai casually tossed a giant gecko and belted a vicious roar before running off, unwilling to tangle with me. Smart move, Big Bear. Only you can prevent the apocalyptic ass-whooping from Karl Marx, sniper assassin. I took in the exquisite sights of Zion, its many boulders and rocks standing proud and undisturbed by the outside world. It's a horizon constructed by nature, with no skyscraping buildings or echoes of the pre-war mucking it up. What little human effect there is overwhelmed by colossal stones. Onward, I find myself distracted by the wildlife. The horrible cazadores make a return and remain the bane of my existence. Bighorners graze the lands with little fear. Giant rat scorpions charge from every angle, their stingers at the ready. Each possesses varying degrees of aggression, but is equally vulnerable to bullets. Except for the bighorner, I vow to protect them when convenient for me. Rather than sprint to the Dead Horse camp, I take a quick pit stop at one of the many ranger stations, where I encounter a park ranger hat. When in Rome, you know? I can already feel the crushing weight of Dead Money's harsh truths of humanity lifting from me. Honest Hearts is replacing the oppressive darkness with serene, preserved nature. It's a paradise. Following the stream whose eternity of effort has created this ravine, I find the Dead Horse camp. The tribal people have their own language that formed as a unique combination of English, German, and Navajo. With some context clues, it's relatively easy to figure out what they're saying. I met with Joshua Graham, the Burned Man, the renowned legend of the Wastes. His skin is roasted and still covered in bandages. Once a humble new Canaanite, Graham became caught up with Caesar and his nomadic army of reconditioned conquered tribes. He committed countless horrors across the wasteland in service to the Legion, always rationalizing his actions by telling himself that he was making the best of a bad situation. He believed his lies, but when the time came and he was severed from the Legion, he chose not to blame Caesar, but himself. Reflecting on his past and the monster he became, Joshua Graham now hopes to recompense his sins, seeking forgiveness from those he abandoned and left stricken under the flag of the bull. Karl Marx Sniper Assassin is one step ahead of him and has already long killed Caesar, sending the Legion into an uncontrolled tailspin from which it likely cannot recover. Joshua was only mildly impressed. It'll take more than that to get his attention. To earn his trust, he wants me to get involved in the brewing tension between the Whitelegs and the tribe who call the Zion Canyon home. The Burned Man and the Dead Horse tribe have agreed to an alliance with the Sorrows, led by Daniel. Together, they plot a way to escape the Whitelegs invasion. But they'll need supplies to make some meaningful progress on that front, and it's up to me to scrounge those up. Joshua is tasking me with a scavenger hunt across the valley. Follows Chalk will be my guide, as he is the only Dead Horse who is both a skilled scout and not fazed by encroaching on pre-war buildings, which his fellow tribespeople have deemed taboo, marking them with their handprints. We must recover a compass from a crashed bus, a litter of little scout lunchboxes from the general store, a medical kit from the Zion Ranger Station, and some walkie-talkies from the fishing lodge. The crashed bus was nearest me, so that became my first stop. I set off under the shroud of night, the twinkling stars above shining with their light, unabated by man's hubris as it would be in the Mojave. Here, not even the glow of the strip can drown them out. A herd of bark scorpions attacked without warning, but were no match for what came out of my hunting rifle. Indeed, Zion was no walk in the park. I would need to keep my head on a swivel to make it out alive. Dead Horse scouts lurked throughout the canyon, gathering intel vital to survival. Seeing them slink around gives Zion some much-needed life, offering the impression that things are happening beyond my field of view. The constant attacks from the Whitelegs and the animals populating the lands between important quest markers also do well to breathe life into the world of Zion. Although overall, I find the environment in Honest Hearts to be bland and uninteresting. The vistas on display are undoubtedly incredible, but are let down by the limitations of the old Gamebryo engine. Fallout 3 and New Vegas were never the most technically impressive games on the market. Outside of that one time while exiting Vault 101, hardly anyone has ever stepped into the Capital Wasteland or the Mojave and been blown away by the graphics. So designing a visually striking world is an uphill battle. These games rely on the stories and exploration to make them engaging, rather than pure visual stimulation. It is not impossible though, as Dead Money delivered a uniquely dark and beautiful environment under the same conditions as Honest Hearts. However, Zion struggles to realize its potential because it's replacing the claustrophobic, horror-filled streets of the Sierra Madre with wide-open landscapes that stretch as far as the eye can see, and end up looking like a sea of undifferentiated rocks dotted with dull points of interest. On its surface, Dead Money appears potent, curated, and intimate. Meanwhile, Honest Hearts is diluted, punchless, and shallow. Digging deeper, it's clear how much more Honest Hearts has to give, but the scenery did little to inspire or fill me with the same sense of wonder and mystery from gawking at the Madre. This means that the gauntlet of fetch quests given by Joshua Graham was more tedious and annoying than the developers likely intended, as instead of it being an excuse to wander a lovingly crafted environment, it was a yawning stroll down uninteresting trails. Anyway, I came across the bus whose wreckage held a compass hostage. I attempted to liberate it by jumping into the gorge that had swallowed the bus whole, but upon meeting the ground, my legs shattered beneath me. With round 2, I took a more measured approach and slowly descended into the ravine. Inspecting the crash site, I found skeletons floating in knee-deep water, many of them too small to be an adult's. Lunch boxes are also scattered, having been tossed when the bus fell. Somehow, these vault deck lunchboxes are not good enough for Joshua Graham because he will only accept the Lil Scout ones from the general store. The compass was broken, but my immense repair skills quickly pieced it back together, and I had it ready for Daniel's waiting hands. Next up was the walkie-talkies from the fishing lodge. It was still nighttime, but luckily I was unafraid of the dark and the icky creatures hiding therein. White Lakes continued to act as speed bumps between me and wherever I hoped to go in Zion. My trusty hunting rifle was doing some solid work, exploding the craniums of White Lake warriors, wielding their flaming junk swords. But there was a slew of new weaponry just waiting to be used with honest hearts. I switched to the brand new 45 auto pistol, the sidearm of choice for any discerning bringers of annihilation, such as Joshua Graham. Aside from being dope as hell to look at, it's also capable of dishing out serious damage, along with its submachine gun brethren. The green geckos taking shelter in the fishing lodge quickly discovered this as I rushed in and cleared them out with the help of Follows Chalk, who bore witness to how asses get kicked in the Mojave. The fishing lodge is a standard gathering hall for like-minded individuals, but its chairs, tables, and drinks are now empty, abandoned, and unclaimed. More for me, I suppose. The walkie-talkies are stored in a locked cabinet. Like Joshua's dog, I fetched the walkie-talkies and pushed on with my quest. Next up, I needed to nab the lunchboxes from the general store and medical kit from the Zion Ranger Station. It was only a short walk west to reach the general store, but that didn't mean it was without danger. Geckos waddled along the nearby path, and I wasn't taking any chances with them. My 45 auto pistol blasted them as an announcement that messing with me was a bad idea. I was tired of walking around in utter darkness, so I waited until it was light out before venturing on. Instead of a blaring sun, I was greeted with the overcast sky pouring rain. The mood will have to wait to be lifted. Remnants of the old world lie on the trail as campers and picnic tables rot away. A giant f***ing cazador flew into attack, but I made lemonade from these bullshit lemons by looking at this as an opportunity to put the 45 auto pistol to a real test. It performed admirably, requiring only 50,000 bullets to put the winged asshole down. I don't know why these things need to exist. They are the absolute worst enemy in the game. I would rather naked wrestle a deathclaw with a jar of cram than tangle with a giant cazador. Zion is a monotonous maze of mountains and cliffs, so I got lost on my way to the general store, and some White Lakes took advantage of my foolishness. Putting the first one down, I took out the hunting shotgun to take care of the rest. While not unique to honest hearts, the hunting shotgun proved useful in detonating enemy noggins. With that nonsense behind me, I finally arrived at the general store and rummaged through it to find the 5 Lil Scout lunchboxes. Some giant mantises failed to guard their treasures, so now the spoils of their teddy bears, toy cars, and lunchboxes are mine. The ranger station was right next door, and had its own guards in the form of green geckos spilling from the cliffs. Inside were some teddy bears perched on the mantle above the fireplace. They tipped their hats over their little eyes to get some rest. It was adorable. The medical kit was contaminated after the sterilized bandages were exposed to the outside air, and the disinfectant bottle had leaked. I am presented with the choice of how to proceed. I can salvage what's there and take it as is. I can drown it in alcohol like its wife just left it and is taking the kids. Karl Marx Sniper Assassin came here to get their mind off of the horrors of the world, so there's no use in wasting a good drink on some lousy medkit. Instead, I replaced the contaminated components with duct tape and turpentine, both found in the other room. Follows Chalk has been a great companion along the way thus far. He longs to see the outside world, not content to spend his entire life confined to the valley. His family disagrees, pleading with him to stay. This conflict tears him apart. Now that Joshua's groceries have been picked up, I moseyed to the Sorrows camp to drop them off with Daniel. The northern end of Zion Canyon is the Narrows, a winding chasm home to the Sorrows tribe. Just as Joshua Graham is the acting leader of the Dead Horses, despite not being native to the group, Daniel was in charge of the Sorrows for the time being. He was once a humble missionary before he needed to step up to the helm. The Sorrows tribe and their genesis is without a doubt the best part of the entire DLC. Their history is inextricably tied to their religion and belief in the Father of the Cave, also known as the survivalist Randall Dean Clark. I'll spare this video from being all about the Father in the Caves, as others have covered him more comprehensively, like Oxhorn. Still, I'll do my best to summarize his story because no conversation about Honest Hearts is even worth having without the survivalist contribution to it. Randall Clark was a former U.S. Army soldier who took refuge in Zion following the Great War. Despite his insistence that his life was not worth carrying on, he persisted anyway. His continued existence expressed itself as a fierce protection of the inhabitants of Zion against anyone who wished undue harm to them. Randall Clark had lived his life convinced that he had failed as a father, that he had failed his family, but history will show that it was only through his effort, guidance, and love that the Sorrows could survive in a harsh world while keeping their innocence intact. They celebrate and worship him as the father he never thought he was. The survivalist story is devastating but beautiful. It single-handedly establishes Honest Hearts as a worthwhile expansion in the Fallout universe. I would love to see it adapted into a film someday. Still, even in its current form, a bunch of terminal entries stashed in caves, it remains one of the shining examples of Fallout's rich and fertile soil, on which the fruits of unique and powerful storytelling may be born. I dropped off the supplies to Daniel, who filled me in on the next step of their master plan.
Specifically, I need you to scout out some locations for Whitelegs and try to recover a map of Grand Staircase.
To the surprise of no one, my part was to fetch even more stuff from the valley. Daniel and the Sorrows, unwilling to shed unnecessary blood, are plotting their escape from Zion and the Whiteleg Scourge, but they need help. I am asked to clear the Yaogwai threat at Pine Creek, deal with the traps preventing travel across the old Rockville Bridge, take care of the White Lake camp at Bighorn Bluff, and recover the map of the Grand Staircase from Morning Glory Cave. Seems easy enough. Follows Chalk was dismissed without my say, but that opened the door for a new companion to slot in and take his place. Waking Cloud is a woman who holds the title of midwife for the Sorrows, the literal deliverer of sorrows. She is also one of the first to be converted by Daniel's religious teachings, as he saved her life while she was giving birth to her third child. She has a deep reverence for Daniel and the Sorrows tribe, believing wholeheartedly in their lore, but also in Daniel's holy teaching, as she, along with many others, conflates the father in the cave with the stories of the Mormon book. They don't dismiss his religion because they think it's the same as theirs. Daniel doesn't seem to realize this until I bring it up.
How stupid of me. They probably also think Mary is the mother and Jesus is the child.
I again embarked into the canyon to check my new busy work off the to-do list. Joshua Graham took advantage of the natural choke point of the Narrows exit and confronted me before I could leave. Our conversation set the stage for the major ethical conflict of Honest Hearts. Joshua and Daniel maintain an agreement to help one another. They agree they must do something to keep the Whitelegs from overrunning and destroying them, but they can't agree on how. Daniel believes that the innocence of the Sorrows must be upheld, even if it comes at the cost of losing their home in Zion. Meanwhile, Joshua is set on making the Whitelegs pay and utterly exterminating them, as it's the only way to ensure their continued peace and existence in Zion. Daniel has no problem killing any Whitelegs that threaten the Sorrows, but can't bring himself to wage an all-out conflict against them, to go out of his way to violently remove another tribe when other options are available. They both want peace, but have different ideas about what they're willing to sacrifice. It's a genuinely fascinating question to consider, and makes the droning fetch quests worthwhile. While I'm off doing mindless tasks, I can chew on the moral dilemma presented to me. So, off to those mindless quests then. Traveling off to Morning Glory Cave, I sought out the map of the Grand Staircase, one of the necessary items for the Sorrows and dead horses to evacuate from Zion. The Grand Staircase is a wilderness region to the east of the canyon that Daniel is confident will provide them refuge from any would-be attackers, as living off the land is not something raiders, Whitelegs, or any other parasitic invading forces are capable of doing, as they persist entirely on taking from others. Waking Cloud has some hang-ups about hopping into the Father's caves, as her people believe they are cursed. Anyone who dares tread into them is subjected to the Father's wrath. This idea of taboo, superstition, and mythology unique to the Sorrows beautifully illustrates the power of fiction and storytelling for a society. The Sorrows developed this fear after one of their own had gone into a cave and was snared by the Father's traps. From then on, the Sorrows took that as a message that to seek out the places the Father once dwelled is met with fierce punishment. In reality, the Father was just a grizzled old man who sought to do what he thought was right by helping those who were around to be helped from a distance. His caves are not haunted by his spirit, designed to punish anyone from seeking his wisdom. His traps were laid to protect him while he was living in those caves. That someone stumbled on them later was just bad luck. That he is considered the ancestral spirit of the Sorrows, a benevolent entity watching over them, was just a cute story Randall Clark told the people he was helping to keep them from discovering that he was an old man who grew weaker by the year. He didn't want to shatter their illusion. The Father was right to do so. He gave them a harmless untruth, a fiction that made them happy, healthy, and kind. We are all at the mercy of seeing the world through the filter of the stories we are told about it. The sun is often seen as a symbol of life, light, and warmth, but the objective reality is that it's just a massive ball of exploding hydrogen. Humans are impossibly skilled at taking the raw materials of truth and forging them into tools that we need to survive. The universe is chaos, a scrambled mess of incomprehensible madness. Still, we can impart easily digestible meaning and narrative onto it, make sense of it all, and become its master. The Father of the Caves is just a story, but its seeds of truth had borne far greater fruits of fiction that sustained a group of people to be their best selves. That theme of mythology and legends growing out of something smaller and more mundane is seen all throughout Honest Hearts, most notably in the story of the Burned Man. Joshua Graham survived his inferno and continues to walk the earth. Still, the power of the narrative was enough to inspire fear in Caesar, forcing him to launch a campaign to raze everything Joshua ever touched, to keep his legend from undermining his authority. I convinced Waking Cloud that it was no big deal to clomp into one of the Father's caves and pilfer its treasures. We'd nab the map, in and out. Next up was to clear the old Rockville Bridge of White Lake traps. Waking Cloud tells me the traps will tear their people to shreds if left there during their escape from Zion. I can complete the quest by disarming the traps, of which there are 6, or by killing the nearby White Lakes who laid them. 6 bear traps on a fairly forgiving bridge seems hardly like a deal-breaking hazard, but I'll do as I'm told. I decided it would be more fun to take out the scheming White Legs than to mess with a bunch of munching bear traps. With my ranger hat and trench coat, I assumed the role of a no-nonsense guardian of the park, dispensing justice with screaming lead pouring out of my scoped revolver. They never stood a chance. The Sorrows and Dead Horses shall now have no fear crossing this one bridge among many in Zion. Next up is dealing with the Yaogwai nest. A short walk to the eastward section of the canyon in the pouring rain had put me on a collision course with several of Zion's critters, each more menacing than the last. What started as simple skirmishes with bloatflies had become tense battles with cazadors and geckos. Eventually, I cleared the dangers ahead until I came across the final boss of this quest, the nest of Yaogwai, giving the Sorrows pause as they plan their escape. A handful of the beastly bears are sitting in a valley. I took my trusty hunting rifle and sent each to the Yaogwai afterlife. My next objective is to pull a good old-fashioned prank on the White Leg encampment at Bighorn Bluff. Venturing into the Zion night, I was eager to pull an all-time prank on these White Legs, who had set up their campsite at Bighorn Bluff. The White Legs have their own mythology, including imparting undue meaning on these strange war totems scattered across their camps. Their stories go that if the war totem is tampered with or taken the night before a big battle, it serves as a bad omen for their efforts, causing their morale to crumble. I wasn't content on stealing a pile of trash they call a war totem, so I also threw in a volley of grenades to clear out the White Leg resistance, who were desperately trying to save their magic pole. That wraps up the preparation for the Sorrows and Dead Horses to make their final decision that will steer the course of their future for generations to come. Do they fight for Zion and lose their innocence, or let go and find a home elsewhere with their souls intact? I returned to Daniel at the Sorrows camp to seal the tribe's fate. Daniel is adamant that the best and only real option should be quietly exiting Zion and fleeing to the Grand Staircase, where they can lay claim and start anew. Joshua Graham has other plans and wants to crush the White Legs, offering them no quarter in the lands that rightfully belong to the dead horses and sorrows. The Whitelegs deserve the vengeful hand of God to strike them down.
But we can't expect God to do all the work.
The practiced wrath of Joshua would have to do for now. Ultimately, Honest Hearts places the burden of deciding on me. I have the final say on what path these people would take. While I don't want the Gentle Sorrows tribe to become a warmongering group of savages, I do think their ancestral spirit in the Father of the Caves would want them to do what it takes to defend their land. He gave them Zion as a gift, asking only that they be kind and modest and never hurt each other. But if someone tries to harm them, strike back with righteous anger. This crisis with the Whitelegs is not an unjust conflict for them to participate in. Fighting back is the only way to fulfill the Father's wishes and give the Whitelegs what they deserve. So I told Daniel to get ready for a battle. They are staying in Zion, but it's going to leave some stains that may not come out for generations. Joshua is waiting outside the Narrows to greet me. He knows Daniel disapproves of the decision, but it's what has to be done if they want to stay. Joshua doesn't mince words about what this is. It's an all-out extermination. We would be blazing a warpath through Zion until we reach Salt Upon Wounds, the leader of the Whitelegs, and deal with him. What a glorious warpath it was. I slayed enemy resistance by the dozens. Hordes of Whitelegs were crushed underfoot by our vengeful fury. Streams of lead coursed through the night air, connecting with Whiteleg forces and tearing them apart. When I began this journey to Zion, I did so as an escape from the horrors of the Sierra Madre and what it taught me of the darkness dwelling within the hearts of men. Still, I have since found myself corrupted by that same poison of control, greed, and selfish ideas about what is right or just. Perhaps I am no better than Frederick Sinclair or Father Elijah, but if I can't help myself be better, I can find solace in knowing that I am doing what I believe helps the Sorrows and Dead Horses stay home in Zion. We entered the Three Marys Cavern, where the final stage of the battle would commence. Scenes of total carnage unfolding at every turn. Dead Horses and Sorrow's warriors are seen butchering the cowering Whitelegs, but their concession was not heeded. The Whitelegs' time for surrender was long before. Now they face the consequences. At the end of this, Joshua Graham has rounded up a group of Whitelegs, including their leader, Salt Upon Wounds. He threatens to execute him like an animal, but I convince Joshua to let him die on his feet like a warrior. He reluctantly agrees. Thus, I feel slightly better about slaughtering him. And with that, it concludes Honest Hearts. A slideshow describes the results of my decisions, that I single-handedly caused the Sorrows to shed their innocence in favor for a new thirst for blood. But hey, at least they got to keep their piece of land. I may have made a mistake. The dark disease of evil has spread to me, and I passed it along to the good people of Zion. Back to the Mojave, my business in Zion is now completed. Maybe I'll have better luck making the right call when I get to the Big Empty. I found that Honest Hearts had a somewhat lackluster map of uninteresting rocks and stones and mountains, but it was more than made up for by a brilliant character in Joshua Graham and Randall Dean Clark. The Father in the Caves and the Burned Man are two legends of Zion that I loved exploring and learning more about, even if Zion itself was sort of lacking in interesting places to walk around and look at. The struggle of the Dead Horses and the Sorrows, making the tough decision between staying home or finding a new one because the Whitelegs were invading their lands, was an interesting moral dilemma that I chewed on for a bit, but ultimately made the wrong choice because I'm an idiot, I suppose. But anyway, thank you for watching, and I hope you can find the people, things, and activities around you that make you happy, healthy, and kind. Your darkest moments don't define you, and there's always a tomorrow. I'll catch you next time. Have a nice day.